When over 75% of UTME candidates in Nigeria scored below 200 out of 400, that is not just a statistics of failure, but it's an indictment, a loud, shameful alarm bell that we as a nation are actively manufacturing ignorance in an age where knowledge is capital. So let's not sugarcoat it, shall we? The latest JAMB results confirm what we've all whispered under our breaths and tweeted with every weary fingers. Nigeria's education system is collapsing, and no one in power seems alarmed enough to do anything radical about it. And we're not talking about a one-off year or a dip in performance. This is systemic rot, a slow, methodical, state-sanctioned intellectual genocide of our youth. Where are the emergency declarations? Where is the outrage? Where are the Senate probes, the executive memos, the televised panels on national curriculum reform? We declare states of emergency for flooding, cholera, River State, but who's counting? But somehow, the slow poisoning of our children's futures doesn't quite make the cut. Now, this crisis in our classrooms is not happening in a vacuum. How can you teach in a country where children are kidnapped from their dormitories, where teachers haven't been paid in months, and where schools are either too far, too dangerous, or too dilapidated to attend? In Katsina, Zamfara, Niger, and parts of Borno, the entire or some entire generations are growing up without structured schooling. Insecurity has rendered education an optional luxury. If you are not dodging bullets, you are dodging poverty. Children in these regions aren't just out of school, they are out of hope. And what of the so-called safe zones in Port Harcourt, Ibadan, Lagos? Even in urban areas, we've got overcrowded school classrooms, we've got poorly trained teachers, outdated syllabus, and even underfunded institutions, turning out graduates who can barely write a coherent sentence, yet are expected to compete globally. Not in this age of AI. I don't even think they can compute AI. So let's not even talk about our universities, by the way. At least the strikes have reduced for now, but decaying infrastructure persists. Graduates are without jobs. Parents who paid through their noses for tuition or have to sit by to watch their children join the long, snaking queues of underemployment and disillusionment. But perhaps the most damning part is this. We don't seem to care, not enough, if you ask me. We hold summits, launch white papers, cut ceremonial ribbons in photo ops that makes it to the spreads of magazines and newspapers that also make the evening news as well. But where is the policy that ensures a child in Gwaza has the same access to learning as a child in Lagos? Where is the will to make teachers a national priority, not an afterthought in the national budget? Let's tell ourselves the truth, and I'd like to start by telling the truth. An uneducated populace is easier to control, it's easier to exploit, and maybe, just maybe, the ruling class prefers it that way. I said it. Cough me. Because an educated child would ask questions. An educated youth will demand more. An educated citizen will not trade their vote for a bag of rice. I said it. So here we are, watching the lights dim in the minds of our children, one school term at a time, while the rest of the world races forward with AI, Gen AI, different innovations, and we are stuck with below par or subpar JAMB results. And this isn't just about JAMB scores, it's about the soul of a nation where our children are groomed for failure by a system designed for survival, not excellence. Nigeria cannot afford to keep failing its future. We need a real, radical, urgent education revolution, backed not by words, again, backed not by words, but by policies, funding, and most importantly, political will. Because you all have political will for 2027, but not for every child in Nigeria. Because until every child in every region can learn in safety, in dignity, and quality, not quantity, then we're not a serious country. And we'll keep paying the price every year. Anyway, welcome to Breakfast Extra, all right? And this time I have a special guest joining us because my usual, if I say sidekick, is going to come from my head. My usual companion is away on holiday, but not to worry, you're in safe hands because Dapo is here with me, the Dapper Dapo. So I like to call him.
Thank you so much, Judith. It's a privilege to be here. I'm sitting in for Mazino. And by the way, you look absolutely beautiful. You look like $1 million. $1 billion, actually. And talking about your intro, your prologue, very profound.
Thank you.
I don't know if, just give me like a few seconds to talk about my personal, life experience and why education, the right kind of education is pivotal. I say this, at various platforms. I thought I was a dull chap. And the reason is this. I started my educational journey, at least the conscious one, at a public school, boarding house, very dilapidated. More often than not, we hardly thought about classrooms and schoolwork. It was more survival. What do you eat? What do you drink? There was water crisis, so we're all keen about getting water. And so I did poorly in school back then. I thought I was
because you're so focused on surviving as opposed to excelling in your academics.
I mean, if you went to a boarding house, a federal government college, then you understand what I'm talking about. It was about you getting water and getting food.
It's dodging the seniors, dodging bullying. I went to boarding school.
So, I mean, I would get a C and it's uhuru, right? And I just gave up and I felt, you know what, I was a dull chap. And that, of course, came out in my WAHEC. I really did so badly. I just gave up on myself. And that made me write like 3 times. But this is where I'm going with this story. Eventually, when I went to the tertiary institution, it was a private university at first, where I had my first degree. Everything was working. Everything. Light, water. There was really nothing needed.
And you didn't have to worry.
Thank you. The focus was on studies. Studies. I graduated tops. Guess what? For my master's, I went to a public school. I don't want to mention
the difference is clear.
Ah, my God. I've never prostrated for a lecturer in my life. I had lecturers who will come, and then they will tell you their opening remark is, anybody thinking of an A in this class,
you are wasting your time.
You are wasting your time. Just think of a bidder. How can you place a cap on intellectual prowess? I later realized that many of those lecturers had self-esteem issues. So I think a state of emergency, someone also raised
it's a state of emergency.
Needs to be put in place concerning Nigeria's education. It's outdated. The structures are dilapidated. That's why students don't take education serious anymore. Also, you wonder why in places where there is no crisis, there's peace, students still don't go to school because they don't rate it. Yeah. Even politicians don't rate the local education. No, that's why they send their children. They are fixated. I'm sorry, I'm going a bit out of script.
Yeah, they are fixated on 2027 as opposed to anything. I'm very surprised that the Minister of Education and everybody else all the stakeholders when it comes to education have not come out. This is one of the lowest in 5 years. It is abysmal, it is appalling, and it's disgraceful.
I think the Minister of Education should even be called to the Senate to ask questions.
I want to see I want to see. Maybe they're doing their ministerial scorecard series. New Central, please send me. Thank you.